the husband who fooled everyone, even the FBI. For many teenage girls, meeting the love of their life, falling in love, and getting married is the American dream. Caroline Crouch was no different. At just age 15, she caught the attention of a wealthy 27-year-old pilot who often flew his helicopter over her school, winning her heart. The couple eloped, but what seemed like a fairy tale quickly turned into a tragic murder that shocked the world. On May 11, 2021, at 4:30 a.m., Haral Lomus Copoulos, known as Babus, was violently awakened in his two-story apartment in the suburbs of Glia, near Athens, Greece. He had little time to react as three hooded men, armed with pistols, overpowered him, tying him up and blindfolding him with duct tape. While he was incapacitated, the intruders targeted his wife, 19-year-old Caroline Crouch. Their 11-month-old daughter, who was sleeping nearby, was stirred awake by the chaos. The intruders, speaking in Greek and Albanian accents, repeatedly demanded to know where the money was. Caroline, unaware that this robbery would escalate into her murder, was caught in a nightmare. Born on July 12, 2001, in Athens to retired engineer David Crouch and Susan De La Costa, Caroline grew up on the island of Elanos, where her parents were drawn to the coastal beauty. She developed a love for the beach, enjoying scuba diving and swimming. She had met Babus on Good Friday. In 2017, Babus was working as a commercial helicopter pilot, while Caroline was just 15 years old. They married 3 years later in Portugal on July 15, 2019, just days before her murder. They had purchased a plot of land with plans to build their dream home for themselves and their infant daughter. To help finance the land, Caroline received €50,000 as a gift from her parents, and the couple had around €10,000 in cash hidden at home for construction costs. At that time in Greece, many people distrusted banks due to the threat of bankruptcy, leading them to keep cash at home as a safer alternative. Caroline likely shared this view and could never have imagined the events that would unfold on May 11th, as the intruders terrorized the family, demanding to know where the money was hidden. Babus revealed its location, which was rather unconventional. The intruders opened a Monopoly board game box and took all the cash stashed inside. But they didn't stop there. They continued to rummage through the house, searching for jewelry and other valuables. The intruders were demanding more, but Babus and Caroline had given them everything they had. In a state of desperation and fear, they begged for their lives and their daughter's safety. Babus could hear his wife's screams as the assailants threatened their 11-month-old infant. Despite being blindfolded, he struggled against his restraints, but the rope around his neck tightened, causing him to faint several times. When he finally regained consciousness, he realized the intruders had left, but all he could hear were his baby daughter's anguished cries. After about 30 minutes, Babus managed to get close to his phone and, using his nose, dialed emergency services. When the call connected, he cried for help, asking for an ambulance and giving his location. With duct tape covering his mouth, his words were muffled, and when the operator asked for details, all he could say was that robbers had come in. An hour and a half had passed since the intruders broke into their home when first responders arrived around 6 a.m. What they found was horrifying. The living space and kitchen were in complete disarray, with drawers pulled open and belongings scattered everywhere. Among the chaos was the open Monopoly box where Babus and Caroline had hidden their cash. They also found a security camera on the couch, apparently ripped from the wall, with its memory card missing. In a heartbreaking scene, they discovered the lifeless body of a white and brown husky puppy, strangled with its own leash. Babus was found on the bedroom floor, his eyes and mouth covered in duct tape that reached his neck, and his hands and feet bound behind him. Lying face down on the bed was Caroline Crouch, while their infant daughter cried and pushed against her mother, trying to wake her. Caroline was declared dead, while their daughter, though visibly distressed, appeared to be unharmed. First responders quickly noticed Caroline's pale complexion and determined that she had been murdered. Babus went into visible shock when he was freed from his restraints and saw the lifeless body of his wife, whom he had loved for the past 5 years. The officers quickly ensured the safety of the infant and began questioning Babus. Based on his account of the events and the condition of the crime scene, the investigation revealed that 4 men were involved. 3 entered the house, while a 4th stood guard. Police reconstructed the sequence of events leading up to the murder and escape. The intruders approached the house via a dirt road leading to the back entrance. After failing to break in through the rear door, they removed security pins from a basement window to gain access to the house. Once inside, they killed the family's 7-month-old husky, Roxy, using her own leash as the murder weapon. The 3 men then entered the main bedroom, where Babus and Caroline were asleep. They ransacked the house and took money from a Monopoly box. Before fleeing, they murdered Caroline by smothering her with a pillow. Babus, drifting in and out of consciousness, may have appeared dead to the intruders, who left thinking they had eliminated all witnesses. Caroline's death was not instant. The 20-year-old suffered a prolonged attack, lasting about 6 minutes. Bruises across her body indicated she had tried to defend herself, and injuries to her lips and tongue hinted at the possible use of sharp objects. However, no evidence of sexual assault was found, though the damage to the couple's home was extensive. No concrete evidence was left behind by the intruders. The only clue first responders found in the house was the hood of one of the intruders, which had likely fallen off during a struggle, as Babus had described. Although it seemed like a small piece of evidence, it was significant enough for Babus to get a glimpse of one of the culprits. Based on the details he shared, a sketch was made depicting an overweight, dark-skinned, tall individual. Despite being disoriented, Babus was also able to identify 2 firearms used in the attack, a black pistol and a silver Colt. The investigation revealed that the intruders escaped with €10,000 in cash and jewelry worth $20,000. Police concluded that this was the work of professional criminals, who had been observing the family, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A police spokesperson described the attack as brutal and violent, calling it the work of someone with no empathy and a strong antisocial personality. As more details emerged from the investigation, questions and speculations grew. One major point of speculation was, if money was the motive, why was murder necessary? Some theorized that the intruders may have been high on drugs and unable to control their actions, or that Caroline recognized them and had to be silenced. Caroline was a black belt in kickboxing, so it's possible she fought back, forcing the intruders to use deadly force. Another theory was that alarms may have been raised when Caroline started screaming, especially when her 11-month-old daughter had a gun pressed against her temple. While much of this remained speculation, investigators were sure of one thing: the attack was premeditated. They believed the intruders knew the couple had money hidden in the house, which led them to question Babus and Caroline's inner circle. Investigators believed that the gang responsible for the murder had received a tip-off about the couple. Alongside interrogations, security camera footage from nearby homes and businesses was analyzed. In the footage, the police identified a dark-colored vehicle followed by a motorcycle, cruising near the couple's house on the morning of the murder. Caroline Crouch was laid to rest 3 days after the tragic event on the Greek island of Alonissos, where she had grown up and where her parents had fallen in love. During the emotional tribute, Babus expressed his sorrow, saying he was fortunate to have met Caroline, lucky to have been loved by her, and blessed that she was the mother of his daughter. He added that their daughter would grow up without memories of her mother, but Caroline would always be with them in spirit through their child. He described Caroline as the joy of his life. While Caroline's burial was taking place, a car was pulled over in northeastern Greece during a routine stop. Inside was a 36-year-old Georgian national, Georgi Heralis, who was on his way to the Bulgarian border. He handed over a passport that was quickly identified as fake. It was soon revealed that this man was Georgi Harajishvili, a violent criminal with numerous prior convictions. He was wanted for 12 burglaries across Athens over the past 6 months. What connected him to Caroline's case was that 3 of these burglaries had occurred near Babus and Caroline's neighborhood, making him a prime suspect in the investigation. One of the break-ins linked to Georgi Harajishvili occurred in December, when he and 3 accomplices broke into a house through a rear window, much like the entry into Babus and Caroline's home. During that robbery, the female occupant was dragged by her hair and threatened with having her throat slit. The group managed to steal 10,000 euros in cash and jewelry. Their next heist took place on March 7th, just 2 months before Babus and Caroline became targets. In that incident, they tied up 4 people, including an older couple and their cleaning lady, stealing cash and valuables. If these patterns weren't enough to incriminate Harajishvili, he also bore a striking resemblance to the sketch created from Babus's description of the intruder. The mounting evidence against him included a history of violent break-ins, his attempt to flee the country, and his physical similarity to the man in the sketch. With this, the police felt confident they had found the man responsible for Caroline's murder. Harajishvili was arrested and interrogated for 4 days, during which more intense means were allegedly used to extract answers. He was repeatedly questioned about how he had located the house, gained entry, and murdered Caroline. The police were determined to get a confession, believing they had uncovered the mastermind behind the crime. The intense interrogation methods used on Georgi Harajishvili left him concussed, but he maintained his innocence, insisting that he had never even heard of Caroline Crouch. Despite the police's confidence in their evidence, none of it conclusively linked him to the crime. In the end, Harajishvili was cleared of any involvement in Caroline's murder. As a result of the wrongful suspicion and harsh tactics, 3 officers from the Athens homicide squad were demoted. With their prime suspect cleared, investigators shifted their focus to a local Albanian organized crime group. Initially, they compiled a list of 100 individuals, which was eventually narrowed down to 10 suspects criminals on a notorious watch list known as the Red List. Mugshots of these 10 individuals were shown to Babus, but the police provided no further information. The investigation was dragging on, and the public began to lose patience. Tensions were high, especially with an increase in racially motivated crimes in Athens, and the fear of the unknown murderer loomed large. Despite the ongoing investigation, the case was not yielding results. Information remained scarce, and even a substantial monetary reward for tips went unclaimed. Fear gripped the residents of Athens, as many worried they might become the next victim. Media reports from the time indicated that experts believed this was no ordinary case. If it had been, it likely would have been solved by then. Details from the investigation that were made public confirmed that there were no DNA or fingerprints left at the scene, adding to the frustration of the case going cold. Caroline's family remained grateful for the ongoing pursuit of justice. Babus, deeply affected by the loss, continued to speak to journalists, expressing his wish that no one else would have to go through what he had experienced. He publicly supported the police's efforts, doing everything he could to keep Caroline's case alive. He was also active on social media, advocating for justice and keeping Caroline's memory at the forefront of public attention. A breakthrough in Caroline Crouch's murder case came on June 17th, 37 days after her brutal killing. During a small memorial service for Caroline on Alonissos, those attending noticed detectives present. After the ceremony ended, the investigators approached Babus discreetly and asked him to accompany them to Athens, telling him they had new information about the case and needed his help identifying someone. Babus, unaware of what was to come, agreed to go with them. By this time, the police had followed numerous leads and examined crucial details surrounding the night of Caroline's death. However, several inconsistencies had emerged in Babus's account. He had told investigators that the intruders entered the house through the basement window, but the window was too small to accommodate the physique of the killer Babus had described. Additionally, Babus claimed that the intruders had trashed the house, yet neighbors reported that they heard nothing that night except for the sound of the couple's puppy crying in distress. There were no signs of a struggle, no calls for help, and the infant was quiet throughout the night. Further discrepancies raised doubts about Babus's story. He claimed the intruders had removed the memory card from the living room security camera, but forensic analysis revealed that the memory card had been removed at 1:20 a.m., several hours before the intruders supposedly entered the house. This contradicted Babus's timeline of events. Another critical piece of evidence was Caroline's smartwatch, which tracked her heart rate. Data from the device showed that at 3:58 a.m., her pulse was consistent with someone asleep. However, by 4:05 a.m., her heart rate spiked by 50%, indicating that she was under severe physical or emotional stress. At 4:11 a.m., the smartwatch showed that her heart had stopped completely. These revelations painted a different picture from the one Babus had originally shared, and the detectives now suspected that the truth of what had happened to Caroline might lie much closer to home than initially thought. The data from Caroline's smartwatch indicated that her heart had stopped before the time Babus claimed the murder took place. Interestingly, Babus had a fitness app on his smartphone, which showed that he was moving around during the time he said he was tied up. Police attempted to reenact the scenario of Babus dialing emergency services with his phone, but none of the officers could replicate it. Further investigations revealed that on the night she was killed, Caroline had attempted to book a hotel for herself and her daughter. A text message sent to a friend also suggested that she was contemplating leaving Babus. This new information added weight to the suspicions surrounding Babus and raised questions about the dynamics of their relationship. When Babus had first met Caroline, he was on holiday in Athens, where his mother lived and worked as a teacher at Caroline's school. Babus was charismatic, clever, and financially well off, which drew Caroline's attention. He even made a grand gesture by flying a helicopter over her school, an act that resonated with many teenage girls' dreams. However, for Caroline, this dream would soon turn into a nightmare. She believed they were the perfect match and confided in her family about her happiness. Babus proposed to Caroline a year and a half into their relationship. At the time of the proposal, Caroline was still underage, but she turned 18 just 3 days later. The couple exchanged vows and settled in Glia. In the initial years of their marriage, Caroline attended college in Athens, while Babus continued working as a pilot. They appeared to be living a happy life, frequently sharing their joy on social media, which painted a picture of love and romance. However, Caroline's diary told a different story. In her private writings, she often questioned her relationship with Babus, revealing doubts and concerns that contrasted sharply with the public persona they maintained. In 2019, these entries reflected a growing unease about their life together, suggesting that not everything was as perfect as it seemed on the surface. In her diary, Caroline detailed her conflicts with Babus, describing some of their fights as particularly serious. She expressed thoughts about leaving to stay with her sister and voiced uncertainty about whether she could continue in the relationship. Over time, Babus's behavior became increasingly manipulative, bordering on controlling. This tendency can be traced back to their non-traditional wedding. Rather than having a traditional Greek ceremony surrounded by family and friends, they eloped. What might have initially felt like a romantic adventure was in reality a strategic move to isolate her from her support system. After their return home, the isolation intensified. Babus was the sole provider, while Caroline, a university student, had little financial independence. Although her mother, Susan, would send some money, Babus often took control of those funds. In her diary, Caroline wrote, "I love Babus so much that I can't leave him, even though this relationship hurts me." She also recounted a tearful confrontation with Babus, where she confided her desire to leave. However, knowing she was pregnant made that decision more complicated. Caroline reflected, "I stayed with him so my daughter would not grow up without her two parents." An entry from July 2020 marked the day her daughter turned 1 month old, stating, "Today, I told Babus, I want to leave. I feel awful." Additionally, her diary mentioned a house in Halandri, Athens, which seemed to represent a potential future for her family. What had begun as a fairy tale love story for Caroline gradually morphed into an abyss one filled with pain, horror, despair, and an overwhelming sense of estrangement. The entries painted a stark contrast between the public image of their relationship and the private struggles Caroline faced, highlighting the complexity of her situation and the internal conflict that ultimately contributed to her tragic fate. Caroline found herself trapped in an abyss that she could not escape, one that would ultimately consume her. In the hours leading up to her murder, phone records revealed combative and argumentative texts exchanged between her and Babus, illustrating the growing distance and dysfunction in their relationship. As the investigation progressed, police informed Babus that he was now the prime suspect in Caroline's murder. They presented him with overwhelming and irrefutable evidence that exposed the inconsistencies in his initial statements. Under the pressure of an 8-hour interrogation, Babus eventually broke down, beginning to confess to the crime. However, his confession was riddled with fabrications. He claimed that the couple had started arguing on May 10th, the night before Caroline's death, stating that their disputes revolved solely around their daughter. Babus insisted that Caroline was determined to leave with the child, which caused him to lose control, as he claimed that the baby was his entire life. Babus described a volatile scene from that night, alleging that Caroline had thrown their infant into the cot and demanded that he leave the house. He asserted that Caroline had resorted to physical abuse, pushing and punching him, which clouded his judgment. He recounted how, in a fit of rage, he lashed out, strangled Caroline, and pressed a pillow over her face, using all his body weight, killing her in cold blood in front of their 11-month-old child. In the aftermath of the murder, Babus expressed fleeting thoughts about disposing of Caroline's body, but he quickly realized that such an act would be impossible. His confession painted a chilling picture of the events that transpired that night, highlighting the tragic outcome of a relationship marked by manipulation, control, and escalating violence. After contemplating the idea of framing someone else for Caroline's murder, Babus staged a home invasion to create the illusion of a break-in. In a shocking act to make the scene appear genuine, he killed Roxy, their family dog, and placed their infant daughter next to the corpse of her mother. He then tied himself up with rope and duct tape, attempting to fabricate a scenario that would cast him as a victim. During subsequent interrogations, Babus expressed feelings of guilt, stating that he deserved to be punished and owed a significant apology to everyone he had hurt. While he acknowledged that his actions were not justified, he attempted to shift some of the blame onto Caroline, claiming that he had become unstable and aggressive following the birth of their child. This child, now left motherless, would grow up without ever knowing the woman who had once loved her deeply. The case quickly garnered widespread attention and was later dubbed the murder that fooled the world, reflecting the shocking nature of Babus's deceit. His confidence in evading justice led him to neglect crucial evidence that could have implicated him more directly. In May 2022, after a thorough investigation, Babus was charged and found guilty of premeditated murder, obstructing justice, lying to authorities, and animal abuse. The tragic outcome of this case not only highlighted the horror of domestic violence, but also underscored the devastating impact it had on the innocent lives left behind.